A man jumps out of a commercial airliner at 30,000 feet, in the middle of a raging storm, wearing nothing but a business suit and tie. He's carrying $200,000 in cash strapped to his back. The year is 1971. The FBI launches the longest investigation in their history. They interview over 800 suspects. They follow thousands of leads. They spend 45 years searching. They never find him, not his body, not the money, not even his real name. The only person in American history to successfully hijack a plane and completely vanish. This is the story of the man who pulled off the perfect crime and became a legend. The rain hammered against the windows of Portland International Airport as passengers hurried through the terminal that Wednesday afternoon. It was November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, and most travelers were eager to reach family dinners and holiday gatherings. Among them walked a man who seemed utterly unremarkable, middle-aged, wearing a dark business suit, white shirt, and black tie. He carried a briefcase and a paper bag. His name, according to the ticket he purchased with cash, was Dan Cooper. He had no idea that by the end of the night, he would become the only person in American history to successfully hijack a commercial airliner and escape, vanishing into a storm with $200,000 strapped to his back, never to be seen again. This is the story of the man the world came to know as D.B. Cooper and the most audacious crime ever committed at 30,000 feet. Flight 305 departed on schedule at 2:50 p.m. PST with a crew of 6 and 37 passengers, including Cooper. Captain William A. Scott was in command with First Officer William Ratasak as co-pilot and Second Officer Harold E. Anderson, flight engineer. The airliner was a 6-year-old Boeing 727-51. Using cash, the man bought a one-way ticket on Flight 305, a 30-minute trip north to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, SeaTac. On his ticket, the man listed his name as Dan Cooper. But what happened next would turn this routine half-hour flight into a nightmare that would grip the nation for decades. Cooper chose his seat carefully, 18C, in the back of the plane, away from most passengers. Flight attendant Florence Schaffner was working the aft section when she noticed the well-dressed man attempting to get her attention. In 1971, it wasn't unusual for businessmen to slip stewardesses their phone numbers. So when Cooper handed her a folded note, she barely glanced at it before stuffing it in her purse. That's when Cooper spoke those chilling words that changed everything. Schaffner's blood ran cold as she unfolded the note and read the handwritten message. "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me. You are being hijacked." The flight attendant looked at Cooper, searching his face for any sign this was some twisted joke. Instead, she saw calm determination. Cooper opened his briefcase just enough for her to peek inside. What she saw would haunt her dreams: red cylinders, wires, and what appeared to be dynamite. "This is for real," she would later tell investigators, describing how Cooper's demeanor never changed. He wasn't agitated or nervous. He didn't shout or make threats. Instead, he politely asked her to sit down and write down his demands as if he were dictating a business letter. But this letter would cost Northwest Orient Airlines dearly. The demands, Cooper's requests, were specific and calculated. He wanted $200,000 in $20 bills, equivalent to over $1 million today. He also demanded 4 parachutes, 2 primary chutes and 2 reserve chutes. The money had to be in a bag, and when the plane landed in Seattle, he wanted all passengers released immediately. Here's where Cooper revealed his intelligence. By asking for 4 parachutes instead of 1, he ensured that authorities wouldn't sabotage any of them. They would have to assume he might force someone else to jump with him, so every chute had to be functional. As Flight 305 continued toward Seattle, Captain Scott received the hijacker's demands over the radio. Within minutes, the FBI was contacted, and a frantic race began to assemble Cooper's ransom while keeping the situation from escalating. Back on the plane, something remarkable was happening. Cooper had become the calmest person in the sky. While authorities scrambled on the ground, Cooper settled in for the flight like any other passenger. He ordered bourbon and soda, paying for it with exact change. He lit cigarettes and chatted casually with Schaffner, even offering to request her reassignment if the situation made her uncomfortable. Other passengers had no idea they were in the middle of a hijacking. Cooper had instructed Schaffner not to inform them, and his demeanor was so relaxed that no one suspected anything was wrong. He looked out the window, made small talk, and showed genuine concern for everyone's safety. He was thoughtful and calm, and never cruel or nasty, Schaffner would later recall. He wasn't nervous. He seemed like a businessman on a business trip, but beneath this polite exterior was a mind calculating every detail of what would become the perfect crime. When Flight 305 touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport at 5:24 p.m., the most unusual hostage exchange in American history began. When the flight landed in Seattle, the hijacker exchanged the flight's 36 passengers for his demanded ransom and parachutes. The FBI had worked frantically to meet Cooper's demands. They gathered $200,000 in $20 bills from Seattle First National Bank, carefully recording each serial number. The parachutes came from a local skydiving school, 2 main chutes and 2 reserves, exactly as requested. Cooper examined the money and parachutes with the eye of an expert. He quickly discarded one of the reserve chutes, keeping only what he needed. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He released all 36 passengers, along with flight attendant Schaffner. His only demand was that Schaffner be replaced by the senior flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, and that the crew remain to follow his next instructions. The passengers walked off into the Seattle night, unaware they had just witnessed the opening act of America's greatest unsolved mystery. With the passengers safely off the plane, Cooper revealed the second phase of his plan. He ordered Captain Scott to fly toward Mexico City, but with very specific flight parameters. Maintain an altitude of no more than 10,000 feet, keep the speed under 200 knots, and configure the plane with landing gear down and wing flaps lowered. These weren't random demands. Cooper clearly understood aircraft performance and knew these settings would create the slowest, most stable flight possible. Perfect conditions for a parachute jump. As Flight 305 lifted off from Seattle at 7:36 p.m., it carried only 5 people. The 3-man crew, flight attendant Tina Mucklow, and the mysterious man with $200,000 in a parachute. Outside, the Pacific Northwest was being hammered by one of the worst storms of the year. Rain and wind lashed the aircraft as it flew south into the darkness. The weather was so severe that experienced skydivers later said no sane person would attempt a jump that night. But Cooper wasn't finished with his surprises. About 30 minutes after takeoff, Cooper made his move. He sent Mucklow to the cockpit and began preparing for what seemed impossible. During the hijacking, Cooper was wearing this black JCPenney tie, which he removed before jumping. It later provided us with a DNA sample. Cooper methodically removed his tie and suit jacket, keeping only his white shirt, dark slacks, and dress shoes. He strapped the money bag to his waist and secured his parachute. Then, in a detail that would baffle investigators for decades, he lowered the aircraft's aft stairs, a feature unique to the Boeing 727 that allowed passengers to exit from the rear of the plane while in flight. At approximately 8 p.m., somewhere over the dense forests of southwestern Washington, D.B. Cooper stepped into history. The crew felt a sudden upward movement of the plane's tail section, the telltale sign that Cooper had jumped. Captain Scott immediately contacted air traffic control, reporting that their hijacker was gone, vanished into the storm-torn night. Cooper had leaped into conditions that would challenge even the most experienced skydivers. The temperature was near freezing, with heavy rain and winds gusting over 100 miles per hour. He was wearing only a business suit and loafers, completely inadequate for a nighttime jump in a Pacific Northwest winter storm. The terrain below was unforgiving, dense wilderness, steep ravines, and the raging Columbia River. If Cooper survived the jump, he would land in some of the most remote and dangerous country in the Pacific Northwest. The FBI launched the longest-running investigation in its history, interviewing hundreds of suspects and following thousands of leads. But Cooper had seemingly vanished without a trace. For nearly 9 years, D.B. Cooper's fate remained a complete mystery. Then on February 10, 1980, an 8-year-old boy found bundles of $20 bills with serial numbers matching the ones from the Cooper stash in the Columbia River. The discovery of $5,800 in deteriorating $20 bills along the Columbia River provided the first and only confirmed physical evidence of Cooper's fate. Palmer's report determined that the money was in a layer of top sand laid down by the dredging that occurred after 1974, suggesting the bills had been in the water for years. But this evidence raised more questions than it answered. How did the money end up in the river? Had Cooper died on impact, or had he buried the cash and it somehow washed into the water? The FBI analyzed every bill, every fiber, every possible clue, but the mystery only deepened. Over the decades, investigators and amateur sleuths identified numerous suspects. McCoy was a Vietnam veteran and ex-Marine who hijacked a United Airlines 727 in April 1972, just 5 months after Cooper's flight, in an almost identical fashion, parachuting with a $500,000 ransom. Richard Floyd McCoy seemed like a perfect match, but he was ruled out after the FBI determined he couldn't have been in 2 places at once. Other suspects included Sheridan Peterson, a Boeing employee with aerospace engineering knowledge, Kenneth Christensen, a Northwest Orient employee who bore a striking resemblance to Cooper, and dozens of other men who fit the physical description or had the technical knowledge to pull off such a heist. But every lead went cold. Every suspect was eliminated or proved inconclusive. Cooper remained as elusive in death as he had been in life. Charges for air piracy were filed in 1976 and still stand today, making D.B. Cooper technically still a wanted fugitive. The FBI officially suspended active investigation in 2016 after 45 years of searching, but they continue to review any significant physical evidence that emerges. What makes Cooper's case so enduring isn't just the perfect crime, it's the perfect mystery. He committed his hijacking during the golden age of skyjacking, when airport security was minimal and aircraft were relatively easy to commandeer. Yet unlike other hijackers of the era, Cooper never sought publicity, never made political demands, and never hurt anyone. He was polite, well-dressed, and seemingly calm throughout the entire ordeal. He paid for his drinks, tipped the flight attendant, and showed genuine concern for everyone's safety. In an era of violent crime and social upheaval, Cooper became an unlikely folk hero, a gentleman bandit who outsmarted the system without firing a shot. Aviation experts remain divided on whether Cooper could have survived his jump. The weather conditions were horrific, his clothing inadequate, and his landing zone treacherous. Most professional skydivers believe he died either during the jump or shortly after landing. But Cooper's technical knowledge suggests he wasn't just a lucky amateur. His understanding of aircraft performance, his strategic choice of parachutes, and his precise flight instructions indicate someone with serious aviation experience. Was he a pilot, a paratrooper, an aerospace engineer? The FBI's analysis revealed microscopic particles on Cooper's tie that suggested he worked in the aerospace or chemical industry. But even this tantalizing clue led nowhere, failing to identify the man who had vanished into the night. In the decades since his disappearance, D.B. Cooper has evolved from criminal fugitive to American legend. He's inspired books, movies, documentaries, and countless conspiracy theories. Annual conventions bring together amateur investigators still hoping to solve the case. Cooper represents something uniquely American: the individual who outsmarts the system, the underdog who beats impossible odds, the mystery that refuses to be solved. In an age of surveillance cameras and digital footprints, Cooper's complete disappearance seems almost impossible to comprehend. He committed the only unsolved air piracy case in American commercial aviation history, and he did it with such style and professionalism that even his victims remember him fondly. Did D.B. Cooper survive his jump into that November storm? The evidence suggests he probably didn't. The weather was too severe, his clothing too inadequate, and the terrain too unforgiving. Most experts believe his body lies somewhere in the dense forests of Washington state, along with most of the ransom money. But the romantic in all of us hopes otherwise. We want to believe that somewhere, a silver-haired man in his 90s sits on a porch, smiling at the news reports about the case that's never been solved. We want to believe that perfect crimes are possible, that sometimes the little guy wins, and that mysteries can remain mysteries in our over-explained world. The D.B. Cooper case reminds us that even in our modern age of technology and surveillance, some puzzles remain unsolvable. It shows us that a single individual, with careful planning and a bit of luck, can still capture the imagination of an entire nation. Cooper changed aviation forever. His hijacking led to mandatory baggage screening, metal detectors, and the security procedures we know today. The age of casual skyjacking ended largely because of what happened that stormy night in 1971. But perhaps Cooper's greatest achievement was proving that mystery itself has value. In a world where every question seems answerable and every secret eventually revealed, D.B. Cooper remains deliciously, frustratingly unknown. Today, a man who parachuted out of an airplane in 1971 with a bag full of stolen cash has never been seen again in one of the great unsolved mysteries in FBI history. The case files remain open, the evidence sits in FBI storage, and somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, the forest keeps its secrets. D.B. Cooper jumped into that storm more than 50 years ago, carrying $200,000 in the hopes of everyone who's ever dreamed of the perfect escape. Whether he lived or died, succeeded or failed, will likely remain unknown forever. And maybe that's exactly how it should be. In a world with too few mysteries, D.B. Cooper gave us one that's truly unsolvable. A man who stepped out of a plane and into legend, leaving behind only questions that may never be answered. The next time you board a commercial flight and notice the security screening, the locked cockpit doors, and the careful baggage inspection, remember the well-dressed man who changed it all with nothing more than politeness, planning, and the audacity to disappear into a storm. D.B. Cooper didn't just hijack a plane, he hijacked our imagination, and 53 years later, he still hasn't given it back.